I want to apologize on Faye's behalf. She's not with us this morning because 2 days ago she had partial right knee replacement surgery. So she's healing fine and says hello to everybody. I want to give thanks to a number of people who made all of this possible. It doesn't happen without help from lots of people. First, overwhelming thanks to the hospital who allowed us to use this auditorium. I think this shows you the importance of a really easy to access, comfortable auditorium in which to have these classes, and they've been just great in allowing an Osher class to use this room. Secondly, to the Osher staff, Lisa and her crew have bent over backwards to make this possible, accessible, and to the video recording group, which I've arranged to have here. They've been recording every session, including this one. I think perhaps Lisa has sent out to you all the three. You've received the first three, and then she will send out all 5 of them together so you can, at your leisure, watch any of the lectures as you wish. So thank you very much, guys. You've done a great job. Craven's Deli, which is in the hospital here, has supplied all the refreshments, for which we're all very grateful. And I want to thank all of you for being such interested, educated, attentive students of this very, very difficult subject. I also mentioned that having the class here has re-emphasized the importance for Osher lifelong audiences to have a really comfortable auditorium with easy parking. And I've always thought that refreshments are critical to keep everyone's blood sugar up halfway through. So I think we've done all of those by having the class here. Now, perhaps you remember from week number 1, the story of Abraham. With his wife Sarah's handmaiden, Hagar, Abraham became the father of his first son, Ishmael. With Sarah, years later, Abraham became the father of his second son, Isaac, 2 half-brothers. Ishmael's descendants are thought to have gone to Saudi Arabia, and then in years later to the land of Canaan, today's Palestine. Isaac's descendants also traveled to the land of Canaan, today's Israel. While with no positive historical, medical, or genetic evidence, save cultural identity and religious heritage, the descendants of the 2 half-brothers are all thought to be cousins of one description or another. In a few moments, it will be my pleasure to introduce you to my cousin, Mohsen. But before that, let me share a bit about Mohsen with you. Mohsen presently is a passionate activist and bridge builder at Columbia University, currently in his senior year. Mohsen and I met here in Hanover almost 9 years ago, something like that. Embracing his Palestinian identity and experience as a refugee, he actively fosters dialogue and understanding across diverse communities. Mohsen serves as the co-president of the Columbia University Palestinian Student Union, where he championed the rights and voices of Palestinian students. In addition, he served as the president of the Columbia University Buddhist Association, where he advocated for inner peace, empathy, and mutual respect. A key figure in student activism, Mohsen co-founded the Columbia University Apartheid Divest Coalition, uniting over 100 student organizations. This coalition has not only strengthened the pro-Palestinian movement on the Columbia campus, but has also inspired a broader college movement for Palestine, raising awareness and sparking activism nationwide during the spring of 2024. Mohsen, to his credit, using his head, stepped back from the organization in New York City at Columbia when it diverted from its original vision. I can tell you Mohsen does his own thinking. Mohsen's academic journey has been transformative. First at Birzeit University in the West Bank, Ramallah, then in Hanover here, auditing Dartmouth courses, and then to Lehigh University, and now to Columbia. Driven by a newfound passion for philosophy, particularly political philosophy. This led him to transfer to Columbia University after initially studying computer science at Lehigh University. Prior to his time in the United States, he pursued computer engineering at Birzeit, as I mentioned, and audited some courses here at Dartmouth, reflecting his ease for technology and innovation. If I have it straight, I think that he completely reorganized the bookkeeping system at Dan & Witt's in Norwich. Now you go into Dan & Witt's and they wave the magic red wand and everything's done automatically. That didn't just happen. Thanks, Mohsen. Growing up in the Al-Fara refugee camp near Jenin in the West Bank of Palestine, Mohsen developed a profound sense of resilience and commitment to justice and peace. Despite losing an uncle, 2 cousins, and his best friend during the Second Intifada to Israeli forces, and more recently losing 2 additional cousins in the West Bank, and numerous family members in Gaza, Mohsen remained steadfast in his hope for justice and peace. His family's continued residence in the Al-Fara refugee camp reinforces his dedication to advocacy and peace building, with a vision for a more just and peaceful future. Given that a generation is roughly 25 years, I now take pleasure in introducing to you my 160th cousin, Mohsen.
What a great pleasure. Can you hear me? Yes. I think he might have muted it, so thank you. How is now? Wonderful. What a great pleasure to be here among you, to be at home, which I have considered and felt from the first day I arrived to the Upper Valley. The meaning of a home for me resonates with the same words that Khalil Gibran has written in his book, The Prophet. And he said, home is wherever you feel safe and wherever you feel loved. And those who surround you there are your people. So you are my people. Thank you for having me here. 10 years almost since the first time I've given my first public speech. Many things have changed. The first one was also through the Osher, through Dr. David Bisno, who opened many doors for me. The location is different. The first time we met at the Hartford Church, or Center right now. Now we're meeting at Dartmouth Hitchcock. My ability to communicate is different. The first time when I came in, I said, I want to apologize from you because my words may not assist me. Today you might need to stop me from speaking and talking. The political atmosphere has changed between then and now. Before I entered the Hartford, or before I gave my speech the first time, I had Faye holding my hand, and I was very sad to not have Faye here today. And many, many other things have changed. But there is one thing that stayed very deeply rooted within me. And it resonates in the first statement that I said during the first speech, when I said, "Today my words may not assist me to convey and to share my thoughts with you, but I am coming here with an open heart, opening my heart to yours. And if you tune into yours, you will be able to feel me and to understand me." This stays the same. Nothing has changed. So today I come here with an open heart, focusing on the issue from a humanitarian perspective, advocating for peace through justice and through the human empathy. So I am going to share with you the structure of today's conversation. I had something in mind before, and now I have something a little bit different. Yesterday I was presenting in front of representatives from the United Nations. We had a conference from 9 to 5. So I will be able to share with you part of that presentation about the rooted issue, the vision for peace, and how can we break through it. But this will be through the second half. The first half, I will give you the chance to know a little bit about me, my personal experience. So we will divide the two sections into 1 hour and perhaps 15 minutes in between, and then allow after each session for questions and answers. How does that sound? Great. Fantastic. Now we have to connect the projector. Okay, no, it's connected now.
The computer's going to sleep really fast.
Yes, yes.
That can be extended.
Wake up. Some coffee? And seems that the clicker also went to sleep. Wake up. Is there any way you can make sure that the clicker is working? Thank you. Another thing that has changed, that during that time I was working really hard to become a student.
It's because his computer.
Now I am a student. And sorry, Sven, that you may have been disappointed at that time that I didn't make it to Dartmouth, but I think you might be satisfied now seeing what has unfolded. Sven has been a major support during my process, and Dr. David as well, to get into school. So let's see. Okay, it's working. Okay, so we're not gonna do part 1 and part 2, but this whole presentation will be part 1, and after that we will do the Q&A and then a break. Okay, so what I will share with you today is chapters of my life. Chapter 1 is the family history. Chapter 2, my life in the refugee camp. Then the second intifada and the power of education. So here we can look at the different major issues that Palestinians have faced. You can see from 1948, the Nakba. Then 1967, the Nakba means the disaster for Palestinians. 750,000 Palestinian refugees were expelled out of their homeland, and until today, we have not returned. Today we count about 5.5 million, speaking of production. Then the Naksa, 1967, there was also a good number of Palestinians who were expelled. Then the first Intifada, 1987. I was born 1990. The second Intifada, which I have witnessed and lived through, 2000. and now October 7th. Many events and many, many lives have been gone during this time. So the independence for one people meant the destruction of a homeland for another people. You can see on the left David Ben-Gurion declaring the independence of Israel, 1948. And on the other hand, Palestinians have lost their home and their lands and been in a refuge. As an aftermath of that, Palestinians were settled in refugee camps. And my family, after 1948, have found refuge in the West Bank of Palestine in a small refugee camp that's called Al-Fara. It is about 40 miles away from our original homeland, which is now called Netanya. It was called Khalid. This homeland, we are unable to visit, to see, or to even be able to understand what it means to live there close to the sea, since we lived about 3 miles away from the Mediterranean Sea. So my family were waiting for weeks, for months, for years. They thought it's going to take 2 weeks, 2 months, 20 years. Now 76 years have passed by, and we are still waiting for a resolution. The development of those houses started from tents, then metal sheets, homes, then mud houses, and now it's a concrete jungle. 4 generations in the same refugee camp on the same footprint of the area. This is a view of what has remained from my homeland, from my grandparents' town, and you can see that most of the houses have been destroyed. It's a farmland right now in Netanya, and what you see right now is a well house that was reserved with glass on the windows, and the well is still there. This is what they used to water, basically, to water the crops that they used to have there. So to give you a feeling of the camp, this is the refugee camp, Al-Fara refugee camp. I call it the wasp nest. The space or the area in which we lived on is about a 1/4 kilometer square, 10,000 people with basic infrastructure. If you want to convert it, it's about 63 acres. Very small area. So what does it feel to be in a refugee camp? You can see the picture. This is the street in which I lived and my family is still living in. Very tiny, crowded place. Shared walls, gray walls. The streets are very narrow, between 10 to 15 foot at max. Alleys, thousands of alleys between the houses like a maze. The sunlight rarely get into the houses because of the nature of the houses. When people die in the house or when they get injured and you have to carry them on a carrier, sometimes it's very difficult actually to carry the people because you cannot get the carrier out. So you have to break a window or to get them through a window or to break a wall in order to be able to transfer them into the street and then into the ambulance. Water is very scarce as well, in a way that the water is being delivered usually once or twice a week. So we have to store water in tanks, black tanks on the top of the houses, and we have to be very, very careful about consuming water, where showering and washing would take place only during 1 or 2 days per week. The privacy is very challenging as well. The sound you hear, the noise from the neighbors, the arguments. You can smell the food if somebody cooked some food, even if it's your 20th neighbor. You can know what they are cooking, and you have to be very conscious and thoughtful before you make a meal that your neighbor may not be able to afford. Doctors in the refugee camp, you hear about UNRWA and the defunding of UNRWA. UNRWA provided actually education and provided medical care and basic elements of the human needs there. So now a doctor can see on average 100 patients per day. That's a lot. The sewage system is very basic, so when there is rain and there is water, floods, it gets into the houses. Electricity, you can see the web of and the network of electricity. That's the situation where it is covering the alleys and the streets. And then classes. We, as I mentioned, attended the UNRWA refugee schools from grade 1 to grade 9, and where each class would have on average between 45 to 60 students in very crowded areas, basic needs. So currently the situation that we have about 58 refugee camps divided between the West Bank, Gaza, Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria. The total of those refugees, out of the 7,500,000 people, now we have 5.5 million Palestinian refugees. From that 5.5 million, we have about 2 million, it's actually 1.7 million refugees who live still in refugee camps for 76 years. 19 in the West Bank, and my camp is one of them. So what does it feel to be, to grow up in a refugee camp? This is me when I was about a year and a half with my mother. This is also the picture of the house in which I was born and raised in the refugee camp. Very tiny home, 2 bedrooms, no living room, a tiny, very narrow kitchen, tiny, very narrow bathroom, in which I shared with my father, initially with my mother and my 2 other siblings, and later with my stepmother and 8 other siblings. So we didn't have much, as you see the picture. We had 1 closet for everybody to put their clothes, and we have minimum clothes. We didn't have beds, so you can see how we used the same mattresses to dine around food. We would use them for sleep, and we didn't have privacy. No bed, no desk, no place to go. We had to share this with 8 other siblings and 2 parents. This is a picture in which I took in 2018, not far ago. And this is how my siblings, this is a picture where my siblings are actually asleep. Here. The same room in which we dine in, we study in, we play in, we also sleep in. And this is not only for my family, this is the situation for most Palestinian refugees. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings at that time, and I shared with you I have 8 siblings. So when you look at this, you think this was very difficult, very painful. You can't even imagine how can you live in a situation like that. And in fact, I did not realize that until I visited in 2018, where I said, this is a life of hell. And to the point that I could not actually fall asleep without using headphones with noise cancellation because of the noise outside on the streets. But to be honest with you, the mercy of this life, as a child, this is what I know. I didn't know any other life, and I adapted with it. And actually, I was happy with my family and my siblings and with the neighbors around. Now it's a bit different, since most children have an access to phones and computers and internet, where they actually will be able to see and imagine and feel how it live in a different life, and to feel actually miserable about the current situation, why I don't have that. But it's the mercy of life that I grew up in a situation I was happy and satisfied. But I went through phases of difficult, dark period of my life. The first phase, when I was 7 years old, my mother decided to leave the refugee camp and I lived without my mother. The second one, when I was 8 years old, I lost my brother, Muhammad, who was paralyzed, and this paralyzation was an aftermath of the Israeli soldier not allowing my father to take him to the hospital when he was 2 years old. So I saw him dead and I held him in my own hands when I was 8 years old, and I held burying him on a rainy day. The second intifada was a completely different phase. I was 10 years old when it started, and it started taking people who are close to me. I witnessed the trauma of losing beloved ones. I saw my best friend Hameda, who was 12 years old, getting shot in front of my eyes, just a few feet, when a soldier showed up out of another alley and shot him in the chest. He lay dead in a pool of blood. And during that time, I remember when I held my best friend and I shook him and I said I could not believe that he was killed in a sudden moment. And I shook him and I said, Hameda, wake up, wake up. And when he didn't wake up, I was very angry, at deep, deep loss. And I said, I promise I will revenge. I promise I will revenge. To find out later and now that the best form of revenge is love. Then my uncle Thayer. My uncle Thayer was killed in 2001, September 12. That's after September 11 of America, when the Israeli army took the opportunity that all of the media was focusing on America, and they went into the West Bank and they ended up shooting my uncle, a shot in his shoulder and later 2 shots in his head, assassinating him. And I saw my uncle, this is my uncle Thayer. I saw him with the blood on his face, in his beard, and on his body as an 11 years old. But my uncle Thayer has taught me something big, and which I will share in a minute. But when I was also 12 years old, I witnessed a strike, an Israeli strike, an explosion that went like boom, shook every atom of my body. And after this strike, after the explosion, I went to the site and I saw that there were 7 Palestinians, one of them is my neighbor, shattered into pieces. And as a child, I went around the site, fire in the site, the smell of burning flesh like barbecue, going and collecting their body parts with my own little hands as a child, and to honor their bodies and putting them in plastic bags. This is an experience that a 12 years old child had to go through. And many, many other traumatic events, between shooting and explosions, the Israeli soldiers entering and breaking into houses, arresting my uncles, and the fear of death that I have felt many times while throwing stones on the army. I myself, when I was 15 years old, was shot in my leg by an Israeli soldier. But I survived. The big lesson, while I'm sharing all of this darkness, the feeling of loss, the feeling of pain, the feeling of a trauma, amidst all of that, there was still a light. And the light was shared with me by my uncle Thayer before he was killed, where one day I went to the cemetery where my brother and my best friend are buried now. I was sitting under an olive tree and crying silently. My uncle came, sat next to me, And he told me, I feel your pain. I understand the loss that you're experiencing, not having a mother, to lose your brother, and to lose your beloved ones. He said, but I have a lesson for you, a lesson that we have learned long ago. In 1948, when we lost our lands and our homes and our money, we lost everything but one thing. He said, we did not lose our hope. And he said, your hope resides in your head, in your brain, and in your heart. And you have to keep it alive. And to keep it alive, you have to invest in your education, because education is the best weapon that you could have. Stories. And I can in your mind and help your people and love your land. These are my uncle's words. At that time, I did not really understand fully, but later, after my uncle was killed, I continued thinking of his words, and to honor my uncle, I dedicated a good amount of my energy to education, which led me to the next phase. I excelled in school. I get always honors in schools. I went to Birzeit University, where I was an activist as well. And later, I fell in love during that time. The story of falling in love is a very significant phase and turning point in my life. That is also the reason why I am here in the Upper Valley. When I met an American woman who came to Birzeit University, and I was able to experience a very deep connection with her, which I'm gonna skip over this story to not disappoint you, because we are no longer together. But a young, enthusiastic, crazy man falls in love with an American woman from Colorado, and he decides to come to follow her and be with her in America. And for that, I had to climb the wall, the 30-foot wall that's surrounding right now the West Bank. We call it the segregation wall, or the apartheid wall in Palestine. So I literally climbed it on a ladder. This is not me, but somebody else who did it too. Many people do it, actually. Climbing on this wall that I asked a friend to construct, going on it while it's shaking back and forth, cutting the barbed wire on the top with a plier, throwing it down, going down again, getting the rope on my shoulder, my suitcase on the other shoulder, then putting the rope in one of the posts that you can see the end of on the top, throwing it on the other side, waiting for the military car to pass to change shifts, and hoping that the sniper who is in the bridge will not notice and see me to not shoot me, and then sliding down the rope, running across the road. This is in order to be able to make it to Jerusalem so I can apply for an American visa. And this is the tower in which basically the sniper would be sitting in. Along the wall, there will be different points. We're gonna skip over this, and I will jump into the second part as a one lecture. So the part two, my life, of my life in America. I found the power to be able to connect with people. Before I came to America, the only thing that I knew about the Israelis and about the Jewish people as well is that they're my enemies. They are the reason why we lost our homelands, the reason why we are suffering, the reason why we continue to be killed in the refugee camps and beyond. But America has changed my life, because it was actually the only place in which I was able to connect with the other, and to be able to find what do we have in common. and to be able to heal the pain and the trauma that I had through storytelling and through connection. And this is something I deeply, it resonates with me, and I said, this is 10 years ago, I said the human being is not an enemy. And if there is an enemy, it will be fear, it will be segregation, and it will be ignorance. And the same statement still resonates with me. So when I came to America, I understood also what it means to be free. I chanted for freedom before, I sang for it, I wrote about it, but I didn't actually know what is it. The freedom of being free from control, from military, from fear. This is something powerful that you could not actually conceptualize until you live it. And I had that experience when I came to America, where I can move between 50 states. I can travel without checkpoints. I can sleep in my apartment and in my house without the fear that a soldier will break into it. The freedom of feeling that I am equal and I can rights. Also the freedom of exploring nature. I fell in love with the nature here in the Upper Valley, the reason I also decided to stay here. But also there was this experience of not knowing what it feels to be on the ocean. We drew the sea when we were young. We saw it on the TV. We actually sang about it as well. But to experience the ocean, to experience the beach, to feel the sand in your toes, to be able to smell the breeze, to be able to hear the waves crashing on the shore, to swim actually and find out that the water is salty and that's why your eyes are burning and you're crying, is something Palestinian children don't know. And when I explored this level of freedom, I said I chanted it for it before, I called for it before, but now, since I know what is it, it's very difficult to give it up. And I am dedicated to bring this freedom to other Palestinian children who don't have it. So I had a story about what it means to connect with the other. And the story goes with a friend of mine who I actually connected with here at Dartmouth, who was also a medical student with my ex, with Megan. And when I saw his girlfriend, she was wearing the Star of David. And when I went home, I said, like, babe, Rebecca is Jewish. And she said, so what? I said, I don't know. We're visiting them, we're talking with them, and I am in a shock because David never told me that he's Jewish too. And she said, well, this is the reality. Your close friend David is Jewish, and how do you feel about him? And I shared with her that the connection that I felt with him was so deep that I could not even imagine David being an enemy of mine holding a gun against me. And that's where the realization, when I had that identity crisis at the beginning, came from. And I became compassionate about actually bringing Palestinians and Israelis to realize what I am realizing here. And I found also that many Israelis did not know much about Palestinians through communication and through the stories that I shared with them. And I learned that miseducation is one of the biggest obstacles for us to get along, to break through segregation, and to break through fear. So this became my passion in America. And when I realized my passion, that's when I decided to shift from computer science and computer engineering and to say, I want to be focused on peacemaking, and that's what took me to Columbia University. Dr. David has played a major role in my life, starting from meeting at Lydiard National Bank, which you have a much better story to tell, so I will save it for you for later during lunch, to encouraging me to talk about my story and to share my experience, to mentoring me about the method and ways in which I can communicate, even to the little details of saying, keep business cards with you when you go to give speeches. So you have opened many doors for me, which I am very grateful for. And we also developed a very deep friendship that went beyond actually the subject of Palestine and Israel, our shared enthusiasm for building, connecting with others, and problem solving. And you can see here me sharing the joy in one of the pictures with the land that I have here in the Upper Valley when I was excavating with an excavator, and Dr. David said, be careful, because I had a friend who has harmed himself before. So mentoring me in many different parts of life. And as you see here, Dr. David and Faye, I had many dinners and connections with them over time. We had adventures as well, many adventures, canoeing, and he here was riding a motorcycle. And these are beautiful memories as well. So he opened the path for me where I started. Actually, I gave many talks over time. I am realizing that I am talking about this is an older presentation, so there is a little bit of a surprise because it's not necessarily the one that I prepared for. So many speeches. This is at Lehigh University, where I also found ways to connect with Jewish and Israeli people and talk about peacemaking. And my story have made it on the brown and white of Lehigh. I talked after the shooting at one of the synagogues, and many people felt moved about the shared pain, the shared experience, the shared hope, the shared passion for a better future. And then I made it to Columbia University, which is now a huge chapter in my life. You might be familiar with Jim Kenyon's article about me, and I have been advocating for justice after October 7th at Columbia. That was a New York Times article. And now the situation is very, very painful. Many people ask me, are you still hopeful? I was hopeful 10 years ago. I was hopeful 5 years ago. But now, after October 7th, Palestinians see this as a genocide. These are old figures because now we have more than 50,000 Palestinians who have been killed and documented. And the data shows that there are more than 200,000 Palestinians who are still under the rebel. The pain is unimaginable. We are in a state of shock. We are consciously shocked.
I think we all owe Mohsen a huge debt of gratitude, Mohsen. I will share with you that I just asked Mohsen, how long are you going to be up in the Upper Valley? He said, well, he has to be back at Columbia on Tuesday morning. So I said, well, you have 2.5, 3 days to just put your feet up and relax. He said, are you kidding? I have 5 papers due Tuesday morning. Faye and I wish you a very, very healthy, happy winter, and we look forward to seeing you next spring. Thank you.
I wanna thank you for one more thing, not only for having your time, for sharing your time and energy, but also for your open hearts to receive and for your dedication to truth and to learning. And this speaks volumes of you and inspires me to be in your shoes. Thank you.